Today I bring to you two short essays by Father John Hardon. The first is titled Heresy, and it's pretty self-explanatory, but it leads nicely into the second short essay called New Thought. I think both are relevant today as we count down to the coming catastrophe that is the Amazon Synod, which has been influenced by the heresy of the hero of the innovators, Teilhard de Chardin. These things are always linked, so these essays are as relevant today as ever. Have a nice day. Heresy by Father John A. Hardon, S.J. Heresy, from the Greek, denoting choice or thing chosen, in general refers to a doctrinal belief held in opposition to the recognized standards of an established system of thought. Theologically, it means an opinion at variance with the authorized teachings of any church, especially when this promotes separation from the main body of faithful believers. The New Testament and the early fathers used the term occasionally to describe adherence to a particular sect. As St. Paul said of himself, he lived according to the most sure sect of our religion, a Pharisee. See Acts chapter 26, verse 5. But soon the disparaging sense prevailed, and after St. Ignatius's letters to the Trallians and Ephesians, circa AD 108, it came more exclusively to mean religious dissent. By the time of St. Jerome, the word became fixed to designate a group cut off from the church by reason of heterodox doctrine, as distinguished from schism, which separated through disobedience to hierarchical authority. From apostolic times, the church claimed authority to safeguard the deposit of faith handed down from Christ and, consequently, condemned what were considered substantial deviations from Christian orthodoxy. In the sub-apostolic age and before the year 200, no fewer than 40 distinct sects, usually named after their founder or leading exponent, are branded heretical by Christian writers. St. Irenaeus, writing against the heresies about 180, names at least 15, mostly of Gnostic origin, that were current in his day. If anyone, Paul wrote to the Galatians, preach to you a gospel besides what you have received, let him be anathema. See Galatians chapter 1, verse 9. Reflecting the Church's concern to preserve the integrity of the faith, the Fathers were never genteel in dealing with heretics. Polycarp called Marcion the firstborn of the devil. Ignatius saw in heretics poisonous plants or animals in human form. Justin and Tertullian called their teachings an inspiration of the evil one. Theophilus compared them to barren and rocky islands on which ships are wrecked, and Origen said they were pirates placing lights on cliffs to lure and destroy vessels in search of refuge. These primitive views were later tempered in language, but the implicit attitudes remained and were crystallized in solemn conciliar degrees. The familiar anathema sit, let him be anathema or excommunicated, appears to have been first applied to heretics at the Council of Elvira in Spain in the year 300s to 306, and became the standard formula in all the general councils of the Church, such as that against Arius at the First Council of Nicaea, 325, Nestorius at Ephesus, 351, Eutyches at Chalcedon at 451, and the Iconoclasts at the Second Council of Nicaea in 787. In the Roman Catholic Church, heresy has a very specific meaning, defined by canon law, which states that anyone who, after receiving baptism, while remaining nominally a Christian, pertinaciously denies or doubts any of the truths which must be believed with divine and Catholic faith, is a heretic. See Canon 1325, paragraph 2. Accordingly, 4 elements must be verified to constitute formal heresy: previous valid baptism, which need not have been in the Catholic Church; external profession of still being a Christian, otherwise a person becomes an apostate; outright denial or positive doubt regarding a truth which the Catholic Church has actually proposed as revealed by God; and the disbelief must be morally culpable, where a nominal Christian refuses to accept what he knows as a doctrinal imperative. Objectively, therefore, to become a heretic in the strict canonical sense and be excommunicated from the faithful, one must deny or question a truth which is taught not merely on the authority of the Church, but on the Word of God revealed in the Scriptures or in sacred tradition. Subjectively, a person must recognize his obligation to believe. If he acts in good faith, as in the case with most persons brought up in non-Catholic surroundings, the heresy is only material and implies neither guilt nor sin against faith, though it precludes actual membership in the Catholic Church. Heresy in other communions has a variety of meanings, which are more descriptive than juridical, since the churches do not recognize an ecclesiastical authority with the right to pass ultimate judgment on opposing doctrinal questions. Eastern Orthodox writers use the term broadly for all dogmatic positions which are said to contradict the first 7 ecumenical councils, i.e., up to the Second Council of Nicaea. In the earlier stages of Protestantism in Europe and America, the concept of heresy played a major role in shaping the various churches. Doctrines like absolute predestination and practices like infant baptism were orthodox or heretical depending on theological orientation, and the conflicting attitudes often gave rise to different denominations. Moreover, civil rulers were authorized to protect their subjects for erroneous doctrines. The duty of civil magistrates, according to the Westminster Confession of Faith, was to take order that unity and peace be preserved in the church, the truth of God be kept pure and entire, that all blasphemies and heresies be suppressed. Presbyterians and others still provide that heresy is sufficient ground for deposition from the ministry. With some exceptions, heresy in modern Protestant churches must be extreme and industriously spread before action is taken against a member of the clergy. The rule of faith in these cases is the Bible, and the norm of orthodoxy, in the spirit of John Wesley, is an inclusive Christianity. We believe, he said, Christ to be the eternal, the supreme good. But as to opinions which do not strike at the root of Christianity, we think and let think. More commonly, the heresy must strike at the vitals of the religion, as in agnosticism or atheism, to be officially prescribed. A few denominations in the Lutheran and evangelical tradition excommunicate even the laity if convicted of denying a fundamental truth necessary to salvation, the deity of Christ, vicarious atonement, or the resurrection of the dead. This may be done only after due admonition has been given and the person shows himself to be an incorrigible sinner and unbeliever. In practice, however, the churches seldom resort to these measures. New Thought by Father John A. Hardon, S.J. A movement embracing any form of modern belief in the practice of mental healing other than as those associated with traditional Christianity. The name came into vogue in 1895 and was used as the title of a magazine published for a time in Melrose, Massachusetts, to describe a new thought about life, based on the premise that knowledge of the real world of ideas has marvelous power to relieve people of various ills. History. The movement began with the work of Phineas P. Quimby of Portland, Maine, who practiced mental and spiritual healing for more than 20 years and greatly influenced Mary Baker Eddy, foundress of quote-unquote Christian Science. At first, Quimby practiced unqualified mesmerism. The client would sit up opposite the doctor, who then held the person's hands and looked him intently in the eye. As the patient went into a mesmeric sleep, Quimby spoke to him and talked him out of his ailment, often manipulating the affected part with hands that were moistened for greater efficiency. Later, Quimby became convinced that disease was simply an error of the mind and not a real thing, so that mesmerism could be dispensed with and equal, or even better, results assured. In time, he claimed that his only power consisted in the knowledge that he had sickness is an illusion and in the ability to communicate this assurance to others. In a circular address to the sick, Quimby thus described his own system. My practice is unlike all medical practice. I give no medicine, and I make no outward applications. I tell the patient his troubles, and what he thinks is his disease, and my explanation is the cure. If I succeed in correcting his errors, I change the fluids of the system and establish the truth or health. The truth is the cure. This mode of practice applies to all cases. Quimby organized no society, but persons whom he had helped adopted his method, passing it on to others with additions and changes of their own. Two of his followers, Warren F. Evans and Julius A. Dresser, gave systematic form to his ideas. They are regarded as the intellectual founders of New Thought and its allied movements. Evans published 6 books on the subject, of which the most significant were The Mental Cure, Mental Medicine, and Soul and Body. According to Evans, disease has its roots in the wrong belief. Once that is changed, disease is cured. A devoted Swedenborgian, he had long been familiar with the writings of G. Berkeley and other idealists. His own character and personal experiences further led him to a point where he was ready to apply an extreme form of idealism to the healing of disease. Dresser, cured by Quimby in 1860, began his major work in mental healing in 1882 in Boston, Massachusetts, where Dresser and his wife, Anita, were competing with Miss Eddy. When Dresser's clients were curious to learn how they had been healed, he obliged with a series of 12 class lectures, which included a study of the divine immanence and a consideration that the spiritual life is continuous, that men already lived in eternity. To realize that our real life is spiritual was to overcome the illusions of sense experience with its manifold bondages. Dresser's sons and biographer popularized his father's teaching. Evans and Dresser remained faithful to the memory of Quimby, whereas Mrs. Eddy disclaimed all dependence on her benefactor, whom she called an ignorant mesmerist. Mrs. Eddy's followers became organized in a tightly knit society. The Church of Christ Scientist, the disciple of Quimby, founded numerous small groups under different names, such as Divine Science, Unity, Practical Christianity, Home of Truth, and the Church of the Higher Life. Before the turn of the century, these came to be known as New Thought, and in 1894, the first national convention was held. In 1908, the name National New Thought Alliance was adopted, and 6 years later, the organization became international. Its membership was extended to all major countries of the world. Basic principles. Although New Thought did not substantially change after the time of Quimby, Evans, and Dresser, there was an expansion of scope to cover a broader perspective than healing sickness. The Declaration of Principles, adopted by the International Alliance in 1917, begins by affirming the freedom of each soul as to its choice and as to belief. According, no creedal profession is necessary. The essence of the New Thought is truth, and each individual must be loyal to the truth he sees. The windows of his soul must be kept open at each moment for the higher light, and his mind must be always hospitable to each new inspiration. Allowing for a monistic interpretation of the universe, the Declaration states, "We affirm the new thought of God as universal love, life, truth, and joy, in whom we live, move, and have our being, and by whom we are held together. And his mind is our mind now, that realizing our oneness with him means love, truth, peace, health, and plenty." In the same strain, taking monistically Christ's words about the kingdom within us, New Thought asserts that we are one with the Father. In keeping with Quimby's theory of the mind's influence, it is held that man's body is his holy temple. Every function of it, every cell of it, is intelligent and is shaped, ruled, repaired, and controlled by mind. He whose body is full of light is full of health. Spiritual healing has existed among all races in all times. It has now become a part of the higher science and art of living the life more abundant. Consistent with its stress on present well-being, New Thought believes that heaven is here and now, the life everlasting that becomes conscious immortality, the communion of mind with mind throughout the universe of thoughts, the nothingness of all error and negation, including death, the variety and unity that produces the individual expression of the one life. All this is to be understood against the background of an idealism that some have traced to G.W.F. Hegel and others to Berkeley. We affirm, the Declaration concludes, that the universe is spiritual and we are spiritual beings. New Thought considers itself a form of Christianity, while denying the Trinity, original sin, and the divinity of Christ. It proposes instead a cosmic hypostatic union that reflects the Christology of David Strauss. Every man is an incarnation of God, New Thought teaches. Anyone who recognizes this and lives in conscious and harmonious union with Spirit automatically becomes Christ. Unlike other denominations that emphasize mental health, such as Christian Science, New Thought permits dual membership. Many of its adherents are active churchgoers in the more liberal Protestant denominations.